Happy almost Independence Day, everybody. Today we're talking equipment dealers, the makings of the mega dealer on Drilling Deeper. Welcome back in, everybody. I'm Kevin Yannick, the editor-in-chief of Pit and Quarry. Once again with us, we've got Jack Kapansky, our managing editor, here for episode 18. Jack, how are you today?
I am, in fact, here, Kevin. I'm well. How are you?
Doing great.
Thank you to our show sponsor, TCI Manufacturing. Celebrating 25 years of excellence in 2025, TCI Manufacturing embodies the promise of concepts to reality as the industry's leading aggregate resource. TCI specializes in precision-engineered, custom-fabricated steel products committed to delivering top quality, strength, and precision in every project. Learn more at tcimfg.com. Thank you also to the sponsor of this episode, Syntron. With more than 140 years of bulk material handling experience, Syntron Material Handling is a recognized industry leader that provides innovative engineering solutions, high-performance products, and superior customer service. Syntron offers solutions in conveying, feeding, screening, elevating, vibratory flow aids, and mining controls of bulk product. For more information, visit syntronmh.com.
This is our 18th episode of Drilling Deeper, and because it's July, that means that the latest dealer issue is out the doors, into mailboxes, hopefully by this time for our readers. We actually had a pretty early print deadline, sending pages to our printer, so by now hopefully you got your print edition in the mail, or check out our digital edition online. But our July edition, in recent years, this is the 7th dealer issue we've put out, has been focused on equipment dealers and trends in the dealer channel. It actually kind of was the brainchild of our publisher, Rob Fulop, when we kind of realized and reevaluated, I think probably around the time when we redesigned Pit and Quarry, or shortly thereafter, just kind of what we're doing and our plan of attack as a magazine. And, we realized, we have this whole channel out there, the channel being the dealer channel, that has a wealth of information, intelligence, because they're looking upward at manufacturers in the supply chain, and they're looking downward too to customers who are our readers, Jack. And, we wanted to kind of up the ante with how we were engaging dealers and the way we were covering them. And so we came out with our dealer issue 7 years ago. The 7th dealer issue is out here in July of 24. And the cover story that we have has a title of The Makings of the Mega Dealer, and talked to some dealers about how dealers have kind of gotten rather large in size. Because, as we talk about time and time again, probably on the podcast here, Jack, some of the biggest producers in our industry are just getting bigger. Consolidation is very active around the industry, all the way downstream and upstream too, because you see some manufacturers are constantly making their own acquisitions or growing organically. And we've observed in recent years that the dealers, like producers, are getting rather large too. There's not one size fits model for every dealer out there. I'm not saying every dealer, is covering 10, 12, 15 states necessarily, but the dealer has evolved, and that's part of our conversation today, as we're going to hear through our interview with Kimball Equipment Company CEO Kirk Rainbolt, who's engaged the magazine in the past. He's been to our roundtable. He's been part of our dealer issue coverage in the past, and we cover a lot of ground today with Kirk. Talking about the idea of what would a national dealer look like. How have some dealers gotten so big in size? Just a lot of different dynamics that are involved in growing a dealer business, and what's best ultimately for the market. So with that, why don't we just dive into today's interview with Kirk Rainbolt, and we'll come out on the other side with some reaction.
I kind of have had conversations in the last 2 years with industry leaders talking about, what's happening with dealers, and specifically what's happening with the size of dealers. I think we talk a lot about at the magazine how producers are getting bigger, and you see the Vulcans and the Martins out there, and there's a dozen or more others that are just getting so big in size, and maybe we overlook what's happening with the dealers, or maybe have, in recent years. You're obviously entrenched in that channel of the industry at Kimball Equipment. So from your view, Kirk, what are you seeing on the dealer side in terms of companies getting larger, spreading their wings, getting into different states? Am I off base when I share that observation with you, or no?
No, I think you're spot on, Kevin. Exactly. I think there's several factors that account for the kind of the shift in the structure. I think the first factor that comes to mind is just overall financial resources, right? That it's a very capital intensive business. It takes a lot of money to fund this business. And I think it's been magnified by COVID. And I can go into detail what I think that means. I think some of the other factors as well are succession planning, resistance from founders to scale their businesses, and then the influence that private equity has on those businesses when there's been a resistance to scale your business. And I think also the manufacturers need to excel growth is also contributing to this kind of mega dealer model that you see popping up across the country.
Kirk, maybe take me back to your beginning, your closest memories as a dealer. What was the typical makeup of the dealer in the year you started? And is the typical dealer kind of just all over the place now? I mean, there's probably multiple models out there that I guess are effectively working.
Yeah, no, I think it's clear. So look, for me, the history of this business and the history of Kimball Equipment and the legacy of Kimball Equipment is incredibly important, right? We take a lot of pride in our 78 years of existence and how we started. And recently, Al Kimball, who was the second generation, we're third generation family owned. Al Kimball was the second generation of that, and recently he's 92 years old, I believe. He recently wrote the history of Kimball Equipment as he remembers it, right? And I thought, what a cool idea! It's like 100 pages of just going back and giving some insight into how these things got started and how they worked. And he's got some stories in there about our relationship with Cedar Rapids in the very beginning, our relationship with LJ and how that Louis Johnson and how that started. And, the stories about getting on a plane and going up to Eugene and trying to talk Louis into giving us a dealership and all the things that was in 1962 and all the things that kind of took place. And the backstory of when Kimball Equipment started, it was, in a broom closet in the back of some store down on Third West, downtown Salt Lake, and a couple of guys just putting everything they had into a business and going out every day and figuring out how to sell equipment, right? And so when we get removed from 1946 and the 50s, and when we get so far removed from those time periods, we sometimes have a tendency to lose sight of how we got here, right? And so for our business, it's critical to me that we don't forget that. I think we spend a lot of time kind of refresh it. But when I started with Kimball, which was in 2007, we had 5 locations, and we were in Idaho, Utah, Nevada, Arizona. Very small business, not small, but in compared to today, revenue-wise, much smaller than we are today. Very small floor plans, very small capital accessibility, but we just keep plodding along and building the business. And with the exception of Salt Lake, none of those other locations were of any large size. They were rather small dealerships. And today, of course, we have expanded to 7 states and 13 locations, and we have done it just through organic growth. We haven't made we made one acquisition, a small acquisition in California, but primarily it's been through organic growth and just kind of coming into a new territory, opening a new dealership and starting from the ground, building a sales team from the ground, building inventory from the ground, finding the facilities, building your service team from scratch. We haven't made any acquisitions. And so that's a much smaller crawl to get to the size of a dealership doing it that way, but at a lot less cost. We talked about I mentioned private equity. They'll go in and swallow up several dealerships that are very successful, family-owned businesses, and they'll be in the business from day one, right? But there's a cost to doing that.
We see the M&A approach a lot on the producer side of the industry, Kirk. Would you anticipate more of that surfacing on the dealer level as well? You talk about organic growth and I think those are each move you probably made had to be months, years in the making. But I think producers, especially, they look at the growth path as M&A is the quickest and, maybe for them, the most cost-effective way. But I guess it just goes to show there's different ways to grow.
I don't think one model is necessarily better or worse than the other, right? I mean, there's just a huge group of old school, entrepreneurial founders that started these businesses who have been very successful and made a lot of money doing it, right? You've got to have a lot of respect for that, right? Those guys come in every day, they grind it out. But what's happening with those is there's a lack of succession planning. So there's no family members to turn it over to. Their options are, in some cases, they sell it to an ESOP and have the employees buy it out. That's one option. Or, they decide they want to cash out. They work their butts off this entire time, and now they want to cash out, and they're going to go to a private equity group, and they're going to take their money. Quite frankly, you can't blame them. It's the American dream, right? It's what it's built on. But so we get these smaller dealerships, and I don't know that there's as much of that going on. I think it's harder to get into the business like it was 30 or 40 years ago, where you could just start a small dealership and you could kind of organically grow. A lot of manufacturers want that instant growth or that instant commitment to buying machines because they're opening dealerships to get growth, right? They're not opening dealerships to start a 10-year plan if hopefully you get there one day. And so I think doing what those guys did back in the day is more difficult than doing it today. I don't think those are the same thing. So you have guys who are incredibly smart and entrepreneurial and start these businesses, but the businesses have just been a reflection of them. That they are the decision maker at every level of the business. And so when it comes to growth, they have this decision to make. Do they want to give up control and scale the business so they can grow, or do they want to protect the assets they already have and maintain control of the business? And then that leaves them a little choices when they go, when they go to retire. I was listening to a podcast a couple of months ago, and they were talking about this, and it applies to, most businesses, not just our industry. But what they said was, if you're a founder and you've started this nice business and it's grown over the years, at some point you have to decide whether you want to be king or you want to be wealthy. And you can't be both. I mean, it's difficult to be, in charge of everything and scale your business. You have to give the control up. And I think that's the model that Kimball Equipment has followed, right? It's third generation family, but the family is let other people run the business. And that's kind of been our model, and we've had some success doing it. So
that family element, not just at Kimball, Kirk, it seems like that dynamic maybe lives a little bit more in the dealer channel than it does on the producer level. I mean, there's still a lot of family businesses, but just when I think about the numbers or the percentages, I feel like there's probably more family businesses that are dealerships than producers by percentage.
Yeah, I don't know what that number is, but I think you're probably right, Kevin. And I mean, maybe it's just a generational thing. I mean, we all know that the complications when trying to find, trade style employees in this business these days. I mean, with everybody, being brainwashed into believing that college is the only path and that's the only way you can go. And, nobody wants to work in a rock quarry anymore or drive a service truck or whatever the case may be. With that kind of mentality that's out there in our country today, I think that less and less people on the producer side are able to pass those businesses down. It's not an attractive thing for them. I could tell you, Kevin, in my own personal experience, I have a son who's 25, and I, would love for him to be in the business, but he looks at what we do and he has zero interest, right? This is not what they grew up with. This is not something they understand. This is not something they want to do. They have different visions of grandeur, right? I think all the generations today are so influenced by social media and what they see and what the world, we didn't have exposure to those other views when we were growing up. We didn't have the social media presence. We didn't see it that way. Instead, what, we saw was, you grew up and your parents said, go get a job and take care of your family and put food on the table. And that's the only thing you did. And so you did that. And today kids don't see it that way. And so I think it's even more difficult on the producer side trying to pass those family businesses down to what they don't think, and I think that's a failure on our part as an industry. We've got to find a way to make this industry feel more attractive, because it's a lot of fun, man. There's just a ton of really good people. The relationships you make and the connections you make. It's a great career path for somebody who wants to do it. And so I don't know how we shift that, but on the producer side, again, I think that's a little even more struggle than on the dealership side.
Kirk, from a growth point of view for Kimball, you kind of talked about the history there, 5 locations across 3 states when you got to Kimball in 2007. Now you guys are in 13 spots across 7 states. So as you guys are making the decision to go, to your 10th, your 11th, your 12th location, what thoughts are going through everyone's minds, through the leadership minds at Kimball Equipment? I mean, that can't be an easy decision. I mean, there's risk involved. But how do you ultimately pull that off, get into a new market, into unfamiliar territory successfully?
So we've done a little bit of both. So initially, some of our expansion to California was probably not as well thought out as it should have been, in my opinion. And the key to a successful expansion is to already have people in that territory who have sales relationships that you can build the business from. That is successful. We've had some successful with that in the Northwest, in the Northwest. In California, it was very raw, very organic, no relationships. And I think what you have to come to grips with, and it's, is that you come into a new territory, although everybody knows who you are because you've been around for 70 plus years in Arizona and Nevada and Utah and Idaho, everybody knows you. Nobody knows you, or very few people know you in California. So your name doesn't mean anything, right? You've got to start literally from the ground up and build a reputation. And you have to do it through, having resources available and parts and equipment, and having service available, and having smart people who solve customers' problems. So when we expanded into California, I think that learning curve was longer than we wanted it to be, right? And I think what we learned from that was we're not doing that again without a better thought out plan for who we have on the ground, what kind of salespeople we can recruit, what kind of people we can build a business with. And so since that, we have expanded and we have brought in in the Northwest, I think I calculated we have 150 years of total, aggregate experience in our locations. We've recruited from, all corners of that territory, and we have some of the strongest aggregate sales and management people and service people that you can find in that territory. And that is instant success, right? Instantly you're getting the results that you would hope to have got. And when you take a more subtle approach without any kind of groundwork being laid, then it's problematic. I think the other thing to think about is sometimes it makes sense to, populate a territory with an existing salesperson in your company and let him just roll around remotely in that territory and develop some relationships and try to, drum up some business as he goes along. And then as he starts to have some success, start making the decision whether you should put a location in it, what the size and the scale of that location should be as he has some success. So, there's different ways to go about it. The M&A way is just very expensive, right? And so you got to have deep pockets and probably some, investment money behind you in order to make that happen. We, on the other hand, we try to do this in-house and organically.
Kirk, how challenging are the manufacturer relationships, that dealers have? I mean, for example, you're representing X crushing company in Y state, but you're getting bigger and you're looking for growth opportunities. You're starting to infringe on the territory of, that other dealer that's selling and repping that brand. How do you overcome that? I mean, can you expand into?
Yeah, I could expand on it. I mean, listen, it's a catch-22 for the manufacturers.
Yeah.
They were happy having very small dealers in each state that they could kind of, keep their hands on and control what's going on there, keep everybody honest, and everybody stays within their lane. But, somewhere along the line, the competition increased, right? And all these companies, if you just talk about track equipment, for instance, how many manufacturers of track equipment are there today versus 20 years ago, right? And really these are, most of these are publicly traded companies. They have to bring shareholder value to their shareholders, and they have to have growth on an annual basis, and it needs to be consistent. And the only way you get consistent growth like that is with high volume. And and so their willingness to ride the storm out and let somebody get their feet wet is probably that time frame has been shortened significantly. And in order for them to get the growth in the time that they need to grow, they have to take risks and let dealers that were normally in one state expand to multiple states. So for us, we spent a lot of time on this topic, right? Because I don't want to be the dealer for 5 different brands in 7 different states. I'm not interested in that, right? In our dealerships are structured as such that, we are a Terex Finley dealer in in 6 of our 7 states. We are a Superior Industries dealer in 7 of our 7 states. And we are a Terex Cedar Rapids dealer in 5 of our 7 states, right? So we've been pretty good to do both, right? And to serve both. And successfully, we have a lot of success with all of those dealerships. And so if I had to expand, and the only way that I could do it was to go to this state, if I took on a brand that I've been competing against, for the last decade, I probably would be hesitant to do that. What incentivizes us is based on our relationships that we have with the manufacturers, and they're all positive. We're really thankful for the support that they give us. And based on those relationships, we're able to have reasonable conversations about what makes sense, not only for our business, but for their business. And it has to make sense for them too, right? It has to be both ways. It has to be, we're getting something from this and they're getting something from this. And it has to be more than an arm's length relationship. And you have to, that you're tied together, especially when you get this size, right? When you get this size, your success is tied together more than it's ever been. And they need us to be successful, and we need them to be successful. And so we've had a lot of luck with that, and we've thought that through and spent a lot of time on it, and it's paid off.
Kirk, when you look internally and industry-wide too, do you think the power dynamic between manufacturers and dealers has shifted somewhat? I mean, maybe it has on a case-by-case basis, but I guess I think traditionally feel like maybe manufacturers were able to strong arm a little more, and maybe as dealers have become what you described as the mega dealer, covering multiple states, getting into larger territories. I mean, there's more leverage there to kind of go back the other way on them. Again, maybe it's on a dealer by dealer basis, but I guess over the years, looking back in your career, have you seen that needle move one way or the other? It has to be a partnership, like you said, at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what's happening. Look, it's a catch-22 again, and I keep saying this. They need the growth, but in order to get the growth at the level that they need it, then they have to give up some of the control, right? And that has shifted. And I don't think it's if they had if it was their choice, they wouldn't be in that position. But you either want the growth with people who have the financial resources to give you the growth, or you want the control. But I don't know that you can have both, right? So I can tell you from our perspective, look, we've had this conversation with our manufacturers. They understand. They have a little bit of hesitation. I would say that's the word I would use about how big can we let a dealer get before they, are calling the shots versus us calling the shots. Mm-hmm. I don't want to look at it that way, because I don't want there to be a power dynamic, and it's easy to fall into that trap, right? Where you think that you have the leverage, and so you call the shots. I don't want to be in those kind of relationships. The relationships we want to be in, where it's a 50-50 partnership. Everybody's success is tied together. We're reasonable people. Let's get together. Let's find a solution. Let's make it work for both of us. And that's what we've done. And I could see where their concern would be and how this could get out of control and the power shift would come the other way. But I think it just depends on who you're doing it with, right? And what their ultimate goal is. And for us, look, if you're a mega dealer that has private equity investment, you have to believe that the end game is to build a business, make some money and sell it off. I mean, that's goes on every single day in this country. And maybe that's a little more risky, but ours is not that. Our model is to build a business that our kids and their kids, hopefully, the family's kids are working for the business until, they choose not to. I mean, this needs to be generational. And so we're not looking at the quick hit. We're not trying to build a big revenue business that looks good on a sell sheet. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a business that's here long term, that's generational, that can be passed down, and that's sustainable. And I think if you're a manufacturer and you're worried about power dynamic shifting, if I'm the manufacturer, I want to be part of an organization that is thinking about generational success. And how do I do that? And if you have an organization that you're dealing with like that, I think the chances are that the relationship will become more 50-50 versus somebody trying to wrestle the power. And again, like I said, we've thought about this many times, and to this point, I'm thankful for the relationships that we have, and I think we've put a lot of effort into making sure that it's a two-way street.
Kirk, looking outward, the nature of the dealer, the mega dealer, do you think we're going to see the big dealers, the biggest dealers of today, get bigger 15, 20, 25 years from now? I mean, is there going to be a day and age where we see, national dealers or a series of national dealers emerge? I mean, that might be far, far off, but I guess what's the limit to what the dealer is capable in terms of size and reach?
So I think what you're going to see in the future is, I think if you're going to see dealers get any bigger, for instance, I think for Kimball equipment to get any bigger than it is, that would require some outside investment, right? And then you have to make a decision whether or not you want to take that family feel business and make it with some private investment coming from the outside. I don't see that something that we're interested in. But I don't think there's any doubt that you're going to see dealers get any bigger as investors look for a way to put their money into something, and that they can start to combine these things and put them into something very large. You're going to see that consolidation. So it's possible, and there's a few out there now, and I could see them growing their business and keep tacking on these mid to large size. If they start tacking on mid-size dealerships or even larger dealerships who have a multi-state presence, you could see them really getting their feet wet coming in. But then again, it comes to, they have to decide when they do that, if they want to be, when you talk about a national dealer, wouldn't it be nice to be a national dealer and you're the same brand? And that's complicated. You just can't go in and buy somebody and expect to be the dealer for the brands you are over here. There's contracts. It's complicated. There's very successful people. They're not just going to give you control. It doesn't work that way. So that'll limit that. But in the investment realm or the private equity realm, I can see dealers, I can see them making acquisitions regardless of the brand, right? And just riding out the storm, and hopefully they can shift it over time, or just having multiple brands they represent. I can see them doing that to get the growth. But that, to me, doesn't feel like a national dealership, right? That doesn't feel like that. That feels like a segmented dealership with multiple brands in multiple states. If I'm going to go and expand, it's because I have an opportunity to take the lines that I currently have representation for, and I'm able to use those in the territories that I want to expand to. Otherwise, you're just feeding too many people at the same time, and it's complicated.
Yeah, Kirk, just to kind of piggyback off that, to maintain your identity across state lines, across territories, I mean, that's challenging. You're trying to maintain the vibe and the culture that is Kimball equipment, that is Dealer X. When you take on different lines and, you have a different look and feel every time you're crossing a state line, that's got to be complicated in many ways, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's not fun, and we've tried it before, right? We've experimented with this, and I don't think successfully. I think we've learned. Look, everybody thinks, well, how did you guys, know what to do? Well, we did the wrong thing first. Didn't do that again, right? I mean, you learn from your mistakes. You identify when you've misstepped quickly, and you pivot, and you go back to doing what you know and what works for you. And so, I don't like the feel of it. I like the feel to be Kimball equipment is the. That's what I like the feel to be, right? And that needs to be based on, your reputation, provide quality service, support, all the things necessary. When you have the, you talk about on the producer side, when you talk about the M&A going on the producer side, what's happening is the the gene pool is getting diluted a little bit, right? And it's difficult to find people and experienced people. And these businesses, are continuing to run, but maybe the experience level isn't where it was even just 10 years ago. They all stay under the, a lot of times they don't change the name, right? They'll keep the name of whatever the quarry or the pit or the family ownership name was, and they'll just keep it. And you'll have a master company with all these different brands within the master company. And it's fine. And maybe that works. And maybe it's good for the local market, but it doesn't feel like a national brand. Maybe with the Vulcans and the Martin Marietas, that's a little bit different, but there's others where that's not the case, right? It doesn't feel like an initial brand. And I want the brand to be our business. And I want it to be, if it was to be a regional brand for us, that's what I want it to feel like. And I don't want it to be segmented into, 20 different products, machine products that we carry. That to me is not attractive. And we would resist ever expanding just to do that. One other thing I would just say real quick, and we're talking about financial resources, and maybe this is helpful or not. I think COVID had a big influence on this shift as well, right? So in the past, you've got mega dealers or bigger or larger dealers, let's say, 5, 6 locations, and then you've got smaller founder-based, single location, 10 employees in the building type thing, and those guys, are protecting their personal assets. And quite frankly, I don't want to experience proof that it makes sense. But they were able to sell machines off of short lead times or maybe even in stock at the factory, right? They could just pull something that was in stock from the factory and they didn't have to take the risk of putting it in stock. Or they could sell a deal on a customer would wait 8 to 12 weeks or whatever to get it. And it wasn't a big deal for customers. And when COVID hit and the supply chain hit and all that went sideways, they no longer could, grow their businesses on the backs of the manufacturer's lead times and stock with it. The larger dealers who had the resources and who had the floor plans, were able to put the inventory on the ground and take the risk. And so they, took the lead as far as selling, large capital projects and it made a difference in the supply chain issues that we just came from. And so COVID really shifted that, in my opinion, quickly. And it kind of, forced some of the smaller guys to go figure out what their new strategy was and what they were going to focus on. And they became more experts on a single topic or a single brand, and less time on trying to put the capital equipment out. And I think that's what they should have done. Now, what will be interesting to see, Kevin, and what I don't know is if that starts to shift back as the supply chain loosens. So now that lead times are starting to diminish, and there is some equipment on the ground at the manufacturer. Will those smaller dealerships be able to go back to doing what they're doing, and will that kind of slow the growth of the mega dealer because they're getting their feet underneath them again, and they're able to move forward? So I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting to watch and see.
That's probably still years out.
Yeah, it probably is years out. Though the lead times are really starting to come, surprised sometimes when I see that what was 52 weeks or 75 weeks is now 20 weeks, right? So I think we're getting closer to that. Will there be enough of those guys still around? Will there be, succession plans in place? Will people just have to, sell their business to private equity, for the best? I don't know. I guess it's to be seen. Our model is, we've got a family business that's got a 70+ year legacy. And we want to have good partners and move forward and build a brand that's Kimball equipment and that's consistent as we can be across our 7 states. So we'll worry about us and do our thing and wish everybody luck,
All right. Well, that was Kirk Rainbolt, again, CEO of Kimball Equipment Company. Kirk, thanks for joining us and being a part of our dealer issue. For more on the makings of the mega dealer, that again is our July cover story at Pit and Quarry. Check out your print or digital edition. We've got some additional perspective from other dealers in that story and throughout our dealer issue as well. But as I was kind of listening again to Kirk talk there, Jack, I realized that he and I really covered a lot of ground as it pertains to dealers. He talked about the different growth paths that the dealers can take to grow, M&A being one. We see private equities a little bit more prevalent today, not just on the the dealer side, but on the producer side as well, you got those sorts of players involved. The family business he talked about a little bit, and how that's still obviously a business model that companies follow, and Kimball's one with that. Talked about the power dynamic. That's something I asked about, and I don't think every manufacturer or dealer wants to concede power in the relationship. Everybody wants to be able to have the ultimate control, or best control over the sales components involved, the business components. But from my view, it does seem like that the needle has kind of moved a little bit in recent years to the dealer because of COVID in some ways, as Kirk kind of alluded. The strong dealers, they're obviously doing things right in a certain way, and so manufacturers are able to put more trust in them and strengthen their partnerships. He talked too about COVID and how that kind of empowered the larger dealers to put more equipment out the door, because some of the smaller mid-sized dealers weren't necessarily inventorying, and we've talked about supply chain quite a bit, Jack. It's kind of interesting to see in the coming years here what's going to happen with will the big dealers get even bigger because of what transpired over COVID, and how they were able to put more equipment out the door, or will the needle shift back to just-in-time inventorying for some of the smaller mid-sized dealers? So a lot there, obviously, but it seems like we're in a world where the mega dealer isn't going to go away.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's the way it's trending. Hearing from Kirk and, reading your story about the mega dealer and the July dealer issue, I think definitely shows that, the opportunity is starting to present itself for that similar growth that you're seeing from producers and manufacturers in some senses. So I think that's definitely going to be an exciting thing to follow. And I think another dynamic of the sort of dealer manufacturer relationship was in another story you touched on in the July issue. Kind of a, maybe not necessarily humorous, but kind of a lighter look at the relationship, titled Wanted Long-Term Partners. And, you were talking with Ian Edwards of Major and Matt Dibble from Dibble Equipment, and they sort of talked about their partnership. And, they described it where it's like a dealer and manufacturer pairing can be like a marriage at times, where it's like there has to be that sort of mutual attraction, if you will, where the dealer wants to be able to represent the manufacturer, the manufacturer wants a dealer they can trust to represent their stuff. So yeah, like you kind of mentioned, that power dynamic where there's a lot of give and take on both sides, it seems, and it's got to be a good fit. And not every dealer is a good fit for a manufacturer, and not every manufacturer is a good fit for a dealer. So that's just certainly an interesting thing, and to kind of highlight this. To tease ahead, looking ahead to our August issue, a story I'm working on now. I recently spoke with a dealer that, kind of, again, is playing that middleman role that obviously dealers sort of serve, and talked about the relationship with their customer as well as their relationship with the manufacturer. And it was just such an interesting thing because it's a smaller dealer, they're kind of growing alongside their producer while they have an established manufacturer kind of backing them. And it's just really cool to kind of hear about how this company is growing in its own right and it's helping this other company grow alongside it. Really cool dynamic to see. And then, it all kind of stems from both of these companies' love for the manufacturer that this producer is using. So, a lot of good stuff going on there. And you talk to so many manufacturers. There are obviously certain manufacturers that will go direct to customer, or some that maybe rely more heavily on their dealer network. You talk to customers, or you talk to manufacturers that have a strong dealer network. They love those guys. I mean, that is, they realize that sort of without a good dealer network, if it's not a company that goes direct to customer, direct to end user, that's their lifeblood. So, so many times I've talked to manufacturers that just rant and rave about their dealer network. They've got such good relationships. They've built the rapport, and, it's just a great example of a good working relationship in this industry.
Yeah. As the dealer goes, sometimes the customer goes, and I suppose vice versa. I suppose, if you've got X brand from X manufacturer in a market and that's being represented by Y dealer, then that's the company you're going to go with, because that's simply what's available to you. That maybe not be a best case scenario, but so much is really driven by the dealer, being able to not only get the product out the door, but service it. We didn't really talk a whole lot with Kirk about the service component, but unless you have somebody in a dealer who's willing and able and ready to get out there, at the the phone call or the text message to get the part out the door, to get the person into the plant to get things back up and running, then it's not going to work. But I think the idea too, Jack, of brand loyalty. We talk about the idea of family companies from generation to generation. We see that there's good loyalty from the customers to certain brands, probably because they've built the trust, they know the equipment, they know how it works. Ex-dealer in their territories representing them, and they have a great relationship. So much of the success of the end user, of the producer, really is driven by the dealer. Maybe one other thing I just wanted to talk about too is just the idea of making national dealers. We talked with Kirk a little bit about how some producers have become a little bit bigger, and you see Martin Marietta, for example, or Vulcan, CRH. They are touching so many different parts of the country, from coast to coast in some cases, maybe not in every market necessarily, but in so many markets. So to retain a national brand or a national identity is not an easy thing to do. And, I'd love to have somebody from one of those producers on the show to talk about how do they retain the culture, from coast to coast, from California to New York or Washington to Florida. I mean, that's not an easy thing to maintain, because as Kirk had kind of shared, to do that, in some cases, you may be a more segmented company or a company that's represented in different segments with, one way of doing things in the Northwest, for example, a second way of doing things in the Southeast. And for Kirk, the idea of becoming a national dealer, that's really representing the same vendors, the same partners that you have in existing territories before you move into new territories. It will be interesting, though, to see if we can ever get to the point where, you've got X manufacturer who's represented nationwide by one dealer. I don't know that we're ever going to see that, but I don't know that the dealers are at a point where they can scale to that degree. But you talked about private equity and able to grow through that means is the primary potential pathway for the national dealer. So we'll see. There's a lot to keep an eye on. And Jack, any other final thoughts on dealers?
Yeah, no, just finally, you going off that idea like you talked about of the national dealer possibly becoming a reality, and you mentioned something Kirk said in the interview that I think kind of opened my eyes a little bit as you talk about that segmenting by region, and that's something that if this is ever going to become a reality is going to take a lot of work and a lot of keeping in mind and in some cases maybe research where if someone does become a national dealer, you have to be able to take into account, okay, Southwest, going to be hard rock, going to be different types of environment and climate in this region, going to need certain types of equipment down there for our dealers. It's going to be different from the Pacific Northwest, going to be different from the Southeast. A lot of different climates we got here.
A lot of variables
in the U.S. So, and who knows if they're going beyond the contiguous 48 and they're going to Hawaii and Alaska, two other climates to consider. So it's going to be a lot of fun seeing companies like Kimball, like Dibble Equipment, seeing how they kind of fill those roles and, maybe not necessarily a race to see who becomes the first national dealer, but just going to be fun following along some of these stories and seeing how companies adapt to some of this growth that they're seeing alongside producers and manufacturers.
One thing that we have for you from the magazine that we didn't have on episode 17 was a venue and some dates on the upcoming Pit and Quarry Roundtable and Conference. Our 2025 event is going to be in Phoenix, January 30 to 31 at the Wigwam. Say that 5 times fast, Jack. Wigwam. I can't be done, I guess. But again, it's typically an event that we'll host in the first quarter, end of January, early February. We just had ours this year in Florida, and we're going to go back to Phoenix for the first time in 7 years. So we're looking forward to bringing the industry together, bringing producers, manufacturers, dealers included. Running theme of our podcast here today, but any producers who are interested in learning more about the roundtable can check out our event website. That would be pitandquarryroundtable.com. Basically, you apply to attend, and we'll get in touch if we see you as a fit for the event. And similarly, on the supplier side, whether a manufacturer, dealer, service provider, you can partner with the magazine through a sponsorship. And I'd encourage anybody who wants to learn more about the roundtable to reach out to Rob Fulop, Dino Vitanza, or Tim Kierland on our business side. So, it's an event where we do a lot of different things, Jack. We provide some educational resources. We've got speakers some networking opportunities, including a golf tournament that we put on every year. And it's something that Pitt and Corey has been doing since 1998, I believe. So, upwards of 30 years here at this point, or getting close, I suppose. You've done 3 of these. This will be your 4th one at the Wigwam in Phoenix. What has your takeaway been to this point, Jack, of the Pitt and Corey Roundtable and Conference?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Over a span of 2 days, really kind of in a sense a day and a half. If you look at, we sort of end about around midday on the second day, but over the 2 days, I mean, we fit so much in. It's the networking with the golf and the reception, and then the next day the speakers we have, normally someone from NSSGA. We have a safety outlook with someone from MSHA, normally Bill Duran or Margot Lopez, who obviously contribute to our MSHA in the law column. We've had George Redden a lot. Him and Rob Mineo obviously are big contributors with Pitt and Corey, and I feel like over the last 3 years, and I'm sure it's been this way before, but in the 3 years that I've done the roundtable, I don't know if there's been a more sought-after piece from the roundtable than George's report. It feels like every year there's people coming up to us, can I get a copy of George's report? Can I get a copy of George's report? So that's sort of a big talking point. And what's been cool to see is over the last couple of years, we started incorporating a panel, talking to producers, talking to some people in the industry, just sort of, after the roundtable, have sort of one more opportunity to provide some education to our attendees, and then obviously the roundtable itself is just a great time when you get so many great minds in the rooms together. You moderating one, myself moderating the other concurrently. Just a phenomenal opportunity, and like Kevin mentioned, any producers that are interested, strongly encourage you to apply. Any manufacturers, dealers, strongly encourage you to consider partnering, because it's just such a great event where we can get so many differing viewpoints. I know last year was probably the best discussion I've seen in my room. A lot of good back and forth, a lot of different things to consider. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world, so that kind of is a natural happenstance, but it's been great. Looking forward to getting out to the West Coast. I've been to Phoenix a couple times, enjoy it out there, and just looking forward to it. Always a good time. So definitely consider making your way out there if you can. And the Wigwam seems like a beautiful property. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, nothing better than a little bit of heat in January, especially getting out of Cleveland.
Yes. Yeah.
At that time of year. So
thanks again to our show sponsor, TCI Manufacturing. Celebrating 25 years of excellence in 2025, TCI Manufacturing embodies the promise of concepts to reality as the industry's leading aggregate resource. TCI specializes in precision-engineered, custom-fabricated steel products, committed to delivering top quality, strength, and precision in every project. Learn more at tcimfg.com.
That will do it for episode 18. In another couple of weeks, we'll have episode 19, likely with more dealer interviews for you to digest. So, again, thanks for listening. And for Jack Kapansky, I'm Kevin Yannick. See you next time.
See you.